Tonight on Greater Boston, I'm Sue O'Connell, in for Jim Browdy. When it comes to the state of Boston public schools, pretty much everyone agrees on the problems. But as for solutions, not so much. We'll get into that. Plus, big changes in Everett after weeks, months, and years of accusations of racism among city officials. And as housing prices in the state keep rising, we take a look at one of the culprits that you might not have heard of: the corporations buying up houses and pushing families out. The city of Boston has failed to turn around its struggling public schools, according to a scathing new report from the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, also known as DESE. The report describes a system plagued by, quote, entrenched dysfunction, which has, quote, failed to effectively serve its most vulnerable students, carry out basic operational functions, and address systemic barriers to providing an equitable, quality education. While DESE doesn't detail its exact plans for Boston Public Schools, that stark assessment seems to point to their possibility moving toward state receivership of the district. That would mean leadership of BPS would transfer to a so-called receiver with broad powers to overhaul the district. But that possibility is already getting some big pushback. Mayor Michelle Wu and the Boston School Committee have both spoken out against the state takeover, as has the City Council, which unanimously passed a resolution opposing it last week. I'm joined now by the sponsor of that resolution, City Councilor and Education Committee Chair Julia Mejia, and Jim Sturgios, Executive Director of the Pioneer Institute, which first called for receivership back in March and has since urged Mayor Wu to, at a minimum, accept, quote, less comprehensive and more targeted state intervention. Welcome to both of you. I think we can all agree that the Boston Public Schools need attention, but what I'm wondering is, City Councilor Julia Mejia, what would that look like if not receivership?
So thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here, and I really do appreciate this whole idea of creating space. I think what we need to start doing, Sue, is listening to the families, to the educators, and to the students who are living these realities and creating space for them to help inform what a path forward will look like. This morning, I was at BATA, which is the Boston Adult Technical Academy that works with students who are immigrants, newly arrived here. And what they said is that they need more support services. And I know that we often talk about more administrative support, but the fact of the matter is that we do not need the state coming into the city of Boston and telling us how to run our schools.
Jim, in reading over the report, it seems to me, and I only read it once, that the biggest challenge is a turnover of leadership at BPS, which I think almost the most casual observer would say is a problem. Is that a problem that requires state intervention?
I think so. I mean, the problem is that things are getting worse, and we were not in a great place to start even 5, 6, 7 years ago. I mean, when you think about it, 1 out of 2 kids graduates from a non-exam high school. That's where Lawrence was before its receivership. And where I would definitely agree with Councilwoman Mejia is that I don't believe the state should just sweep in and take everything over. They don't have the capacity to do it. They have no more wisdom than people on the ground. I mean, what is important, I believe, is that essentially decision makers need to get over themselves, whether it's the governor, the commissioner of education, or even the mayor, if I might say so. And that is create a partnership. We have looked at receiverships. I've written about receiverships not working federally. They haven't, by and large, but we have studied very closely ones that have, and we believe a time-limited, a 6-year receiver superintendent appointed both by the commissioner and the mayor, together with a school committee that's appointed by the state and the mayor. So everyone has responsibility here, would be important. And I think the job number one is to rationalize that central office. They have, if you take a look at other districts, they have probably 300 or 400 too many people there. That money could go back into the classroom and we could actually rationalize things. People leave because they feel like the work they're doing is not meaningful enough because there's just chaos there.
Councilor Mejia, I want to give you the opportunity to respond, but I also want to point out there were some good things that this report showed, which were also under the leadership of outgoing Superintendent Brenda Casilius, another outgoing superintendent. Can you highlight a couple of the in-progress things and accomplishments that Boston Public Schools have seen over the past couple of years?
Yeah, so what first of all, let's just pause for a quick second and recognize that a lot of this conversation is happening during a global pandemic. And we're talking about assessing the work that we've been able to do under those circumstances. So let's just acknowledge that. And we're also at a time of transition. We have a new mayor, a new a new superintendent. So there's a lot of transition happening. And I think, so while I'm gonna get to your question in a minute, I think it's important for us to recognize the timing of this particular conversation, and to, it would be uncharacteristic of me not calling it out. You know, we know that what is driving a lot of these conversations are people who want to privatize our public education, and we're looking for a cop-out in ways to do just that. But in terms of some of the outcomes, despite the struggles that our kids have experienced, you know, I haven't had a chance to do a deep dive into the report, but what I do know is that our graduation rates, we've seen that some of the state takeovers have similar fewer improvements, right, around suspensions. And to be honest with you, I can't speak to the entire report because I haven't had a chance.
Sure, I can help you out a little bit and say that the curriculum has increased so that when students are graduating from Boston Public High Schools, they are at a level that they should be in order to go to the state schools, which has been a problem in the past, as the Boston Globe has pointed out by looking at the valedictorians who were not successful when they got to schools. But Jim, to Councilor Mejia's point also, there's a lot of concern about this privatization of public schools, right? That folks are going to come in and come up with solutions which allow there to be a profit center for the public schools. And you mentioned saying a state-appointed school committee when we don't really have the school committee discussion is still an ongoing one here in the city of Boston. What's your reply to that when it comes to the concern of making schools not public but more private?
So first thing is I didn't say just a state-appointed school committee, a blended state and city, because I think shared responsibility here is important. And I guess I'd have to disagree with Councilwoman Mejia on this point. Look, I've got gray hair, man. I've been watching this and listening to this for a long time. Every mayor has come in with their plan and their people, and it's just gotten worse, at least over the last 15 years because of a lack of stability. We are, notwithstanding the good news that you just shared, and it is good news, this is for me the cruelest twist. Still 29 years after education reform was passed here and billions of dollars was spent, and I don't begrudge a dollar of it, $26,000 per student in Boston is spent. Average teacher makes $103,000. Again, that's average, that's not top. Lots of people above, lots of people below. But yet, the kids, 60 to 70% of them are not being taught what they're going to be tested on because the central office is so chaotic, it can't even get the basic stuff done. That's cruel to kids. It's cruel to families. The kids can do the work, absolutely. And to not even be at that basic level, I'm sorry, that's not a hard fix. It just takes focus like crazy. There are big issues too, I agree. But
You froze on me at the end there, Jim. Could you just repeat the last part? There are big issues too, but
let's at least get the basics done. That's, I mean, this is frankly, I find it cruel. If my kid was in a school and was not being taught what's being tested, and they tried their hardest and still failed, I'd be really, really mad.
Councilor Mejia, I'm a former Boston Public Schools parent, and I understand the challenges that the school system has, especially an urban school system that other school systems don't necessarily have. And at the same time, I've heard firsthand about the administration chaos. I've talked to administrators and people who work in the support staff who have left because of that brick wall they keep coming up against. We don't complain about how much money is spent on the students per students because people feel there's enough in the budget to get done what we need to do. If receivership isn't the answer, and we're in transition of getting a new superintendent in that process, what has to happen to fix this administrative problem, which is in charge of everything from doling out assignments to the buses running on time?
Yeah, so, I really do appreciate Jim's point. I think that that's the one probably place where we both agree is the fact that leadership alone can't change everything, and we're going to need to do a lot more. But I'm a Boston Public School graduate and a Boston Public School parent and a Boston Public School advocate, right? So I navigated this space in a number of different ways. And what I have seen and where I have seen the biggest failure is that we spend all of our time doing this, blaming, but we're not taking responsibility or holding ourselves accountable to where we ended up. So that 29 years later, Jim, we have to recognize that we depleted our Boston Public Schools of every single resource. And then we've expected our educators to work miracles with a little bit of mayonnaise. And I say this because accountability comes from the top. And that includes DESE, that includes government, that includes the district, that includes the mayor, that includes the school committee, that includes the parents. And it's gonna take all of us, right, working in different ways to move this forward. Bringing in a state receivership or any other model that kicks us to the side, it is not going to get us to where we need to be. We do not need to swap out the players to fix the problem. What we need to do is take responsibility that we've created the mess that we find ourselves in. And until we do that, we're gonna keep spinning our heads, having the same conversation and no one willing to take responsibility. This is from the top. And that top is DESE and the lack of investments that we've made in our public education system. And if we can't hold ourselves accountable to that, there's no sense for us to keep having this conversation.
Jim, can you tell me, when you say the partnerships, like who are you talking about? Who are these partners other than the state that you would envision this arrangement looking like?
So absolutely, but I would just note to Councilwoman Mejia, look, Boston is among the top funded districts in the state. It is the second most highly funded urban district in the country. It's not a matter of investment anymore. It was 20 years ago. It absolutely was, but it's not anymore. The second, and to get to your specific question, Sue, I don't really care who it is. I don't think that it has to be anyone from the private sector. I think you could hire someone who's done a handsome job in another urban district and has proven to be really good at building a team and leaving in place after he or she leaves.
Why can't that person? Why couldn't that person be a superintendent? Why couldn't it be let the state and let all the partners get together to hire a permanent superintendent who will be the person rather than bring in a consultant who's going to ride in the morning and then ride out the next week?
We don't need another Harvard. We don't need another. We don't need that.
Well, we might need a Harvard person. Let's not throw out that.
And I have something to say back to Jim when it's my turn. So just want you to know.
The only thing I'd say is it's not the same level of urgency. There's not the sense that, I'll tell you a quick story, which is a superintendent that I met with several years back, Boston superintendent, handed me his or her business card and pushed it across the table. And I looked in the back of it, it was his or her cell phone, because they were saying, I cannot work with these people. Please give me some advice that's actually objective. I mean, it is, they're not going to be able to fix that without some urgency that's applied through outside endeavors. That's
Counselor, the challenge is, of course, that the superintendents have had a very difficult time working within the system. So it would be, a dream to have a superintendent come in who could do that. And they've had these challenges. So I'm going to give you the last word here as we move to close. what's your solution?
Yeah. So first, I think, and this is what I've been saying, is that you have to turn to the people who are living the realities and doing the work to find those solutions. We don't need consultants. We don't need think tanks coming in and telling us what to do, and the real answers lie on the people who are living the realities. That's number one. Number two, Jim, I just wanted to, in regards to the amount of dollars, it's not about more money and more resources. You also have to take into account that we're looking at MCAS scores. We're looking at the way accountability is measured. You're always changing the game, right? And making it harder for kids who are vulnerable and live in these realities, right? So you have to also recognize that the way the system has been created has been designed specifically to fail us.
Counselor, I'm going to have to leave it there. I appreciate both of you joining me, Counselor Julia Mejia and Jim Sturgios. I appreciate this conversation. I'm sure we'll be having more of it, so we don't have to leave it all on the table today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Same here. Thanks so much.
Amid a growing scandal over a series of racist comments and actions among city government in Everett, two officials stepped down today. City Councilor Anthony DiPiero and spokesperson for the mayor, Deanna DeVinny. Their resignations come more than 2 months after the Everett Leader-Herald reported that DiPiero shared a racist meme with others in the city, referencing the N-word numerous times. And just over a week ago, the Globe's Stephanie Ebert shared details of a leaked recording of DiPiero's and DeVinny's joking about accusations of racism 2 years ago and making yet more racist comments. This afternoon, public school students staged a walkout over the situation. They'd originally been planning to call for DiPiero's resignation, but now that he's announced that, there is, of course, still a lot more work to be done, with several other accusations of racism still lingering beyond these latest instances. And we'll talk about that and much more on tomorrow's show. Next up, whether you're looking to buy or rent in Massachusetts, it's no secret that the state is an expensive one to live in, even more so in recent years. And while there are a lot of reasons for that, one comes as a surprise to many. It turns out that a lot of houses aren't being bought by individual people or families at all. Rather, as the GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting found out, corporations are buying more and more houses out from under the rest of us. I'm joined by Jenifer McKim, who is the reporter behind that story, along with Rose Webster-Smith, Executive Director of the nonprofit housing group Springfield No One Leaves. Welcome to both of you. Jenifer, I want to start with you and ask if what's happening here? So I imagine that corporations and companies have always been buying single-family homes and multi-family homes. But what's happening right now?
So it's just happening a lot more. It's true. It's been happening over the last couple decades. There's been increasing investments in residential homes. Businesses are seeing profits around the country, and especially in places like Massachusetts. We have Rose here because particularly when we started looking at this issue in Massachusetts, we found that there's a lot of investors who are seeing particular profits in lower income cities like Springfield, where Rose is from, and other gateway communities. So they're buying up foreclosed homes in the regular market. They're keeping them either to rent or to flip and profit off of them.
I want to show a graph just to underscore what you're talking about, Jenifer. This is a graph that shows the upward projections of the sales of family homes to corporations. The top line is one family, the second line is two family, the third line is three family. And you can see, especially the single family homes, what an increase that is there. Rose, what's the downside to this to a community like Springfield or another urban community? How is it impacting the everyday folks who are living in these communities?
I think it's impacting people living in these communities greatly. We used to be known as the city of homes because it was mainly owner-occupied properties within the city of Springfield. And I want to say since 2016, we've become the city of speculator-owned homes.
Jenifer, there's some real life impact to this too. If you're out, it's hard enough trying to buy a home right now, almost everywhere. And if you're competing against a company that isn't even going to do an inspection maybe, or is going to just pay what the asking price is, what's that impact on just everyday buyers who might be qualified with the down payment, ready to buy? How is this impacting them?
There's many different impacts for this, as Rose mentioned, in the communities where you're living in places where your homes are owned by businesses, by home buyers who are trying to go out there and buy properties with prices going up, and investors coming in with all cash sales. And I think it's really, really hard for home buyers to compete when they're competing with people who can compete with all cash. The other issue is related to renting. There is research out there from around the country that LLCs and other business entities are worse landlords than regular individuals. And they're also just much harder to track. You can't find them. The documents make it very easy to sort of, they're shell companies really, and you don't know who the owners are. This is a challenge both for cities as well as housing advocates when they're trying to hold somebody accountable.
Rose, this is a problem, as Jenifer writes in the story, that's from Nantucket to Springfield. It's almost every city and town in our state, regardless of its economic status in the hierarchy of income. But when it comes to towns like Revere and Lynn and Springfield, the challenge here is that it also doesn't allow folks to buy within the community that they've grown up in, or if they're renting properties available. We all know that for many folks, the investment in the community in terms of voting and being involved, and renters sometimes don't feel that connection. I imagine that's one of the downsides as well.
Oh, it absolutely is. And as you know, more LLCs buy up properties here in Springfield, we're seeing our voter engagement go down, disenfranchisement with, any type of electoral politics. And it's hard for us out here in Springfield when our mayor election is on an off year versus the other election. So people don't feel engaged, and the LLCs are driving that speculative market up in our rents. When we first started organizing tenants, you could rent a 3-bedroom in Springfield for $900. Now that same 3-bedroom is $1,600.
Jenifer, one of the things that I've understood, on the surface of this, if you're not paying attention, you think, well, what's the big deal? A company comes in, they buy a home that's in foreclosure, or they buy a home that hasn't been kept up for one reason or another. They make improvements and they either flip it or they rent it. But there's a number of challenges with that, especially, you alluded to it just a moment ago. They're not very good landlords statistically, not just here in Massachusetts, but when you look at statistics across the company. In what ways aren't they good landlords?
So I spoke with a Harvard researcher who's been doing some research about this around the country. And basically he found that a lot of these investors are really focusing on Black and brown poorer communities around the country. And they're finding these are really good places to make money from people who've been historically disenfranchised. And that the research that he particularly did in Milwaukee looked at how in these communities, the LLC properties where there were more violations, more problems, more evictions. So generally just a lot, especially when you have out of town, out of state investors. Rose has spoken to me a lot about how a lot of the folks buying in her community are from New York and Boston and California, or even outside of Springfield, and just don't have the same type of interest in being held accountable or need to.
So is there a solution to this? I mean, this is kind of a capitalist society, right? Is there something that towns, city councilors, mayors, governors, is there something that elected officials can do, Rose, to at least put some curbs on this, or to protect tenants or communities?
Yes, there's plenty of things that cities and towns and our local legislators can do. So housing trusts, land trusts, rent control, lifting the ban on rent control, tenants' first opportunity to purchase, to turn those buildings into cooperatives so we can expand home ownership in these gateway cities. Stronger eviction protections like sealing your eviction records, otherwise known as Homes Act, and right to counsel, just to name a few.
Just to name a few. Jenifer, I'm of course going to direct folks to your story at WGBH.org, but you know, it's also a challenge about protections for people. One of the stories that you write about, one of the people that you write about in the story lost her husband and then found herself in a situation where she ended up filing for bankruptcy and being a tenant in this situation. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but can you tell that story? Because I think we need protections for people like that as well.
So Christine Thompson, who is someone that Rose introduced me to, is a grandmother who lived in her home for about 50 years when she lost it to foreclosure to a LLC. And she fought to keep it. It had been sort of a mess related to her finances and her husband who had died. And she ended up being foreclosed upon and then forced out. She tried to fight to save her home. They bought it for $94,000 and recently put it on the market for nearly 3 times that amount of money. So in cases like that, I think there's help that could be. I know that Rose had tried to help her in the legal. There's not enough legal aid for people who are fighting these types of evictions, who are former homeowners in these properties. So I think that's another way to help people. But basically, so often these people are going into court and trying to defend themselves with nobody to help them because there's also no right to counsel.
Yeah, it's amazing when you're sort of in a time when you need it as much as if you're charged in a criminal case, you can't afford. Obviously, if you're in a bankruptcy situation, you may not be able to afford counsel, but there's no right to counsel to represent you in these courts as well. Well, Rose Webster-Smith and Jenifer McKim, I appreciate both of you working on this. Again, I direct folks to WGBH.org to read your great work. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for your interest.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight, but come back tomorrow. The Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial has lit the internet on fire, but at what cost? And with some big Me Too men getting off the hook recently, where do we stand in the fight for gender equality? That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching. Good night.